I stood in that ballroom wearing diamonds he bought me, watching my husband introduce another woman as his partner. The text on my phone still glowed, "Don't embarrass me tonight." But honey, I was about to teach him what embarrassment really looked like. This is how a queen reclaims her crown. Before we get into this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what I'm about to share will have you on the edge of your seat. And trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Now let's get into it. You know that feeling when your gut tells you something's wrong, but your heart keeps making excuses? That was me for 3 whole years. My name is Nicole, and I need to tell you about the night my entire world shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. It started with a text message. I was standing in front of my closet, correction, our walk-in closet that was bigger than most people's bedrooms, trying to decide between the emerald gown or the champagne one. My phone buzzed on the marble counter and I saw his name, Christopher, my husband of 5 years, the man who promised to love and cherish me. The message was simple: "Don't embarrass me tonight." 5 words. That's all it took to make my hands shake so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Not, "You'll look beautiful," or "Can't wait to see you." Just a warning, a threat wrapped in casual concern. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that didn't feel like a slap across the face. I sat down on the velvet bench in our closet, still holding that phone, and I let myself think about how we got here. 5 years ago, I was a corporate attorney making partner at one of the top firms in the city. I was good at my job. No, I was exceptional. I'd worked twice as hard as everyone else because, let's be real, being a black woman in corporate law means you're always proving yourself. Christopher walked into my life like a hurricane. He was this brilliant tech billionaire, young and ambitious, and he pursued me like I was the only woman in the world. Flowers every day. Surprise trips to Paris. He'd show up at my office with coffee and that smile that made my knees weak. Everyone told me I was lucky. My mother cried happy tears at our wedding. My friends said I'd hit the jackpot. But looking back now, I can see the signs I ignored. The way he'd squeeze my hand a little too tight when I spoke too long at dinner parties. How he'd suggest I wear different clothes, softer makeup, quieter jewelry. "You're so beautiful, baby," he'd say, "but maybe tone it down a bit?" We want them to take you seriously, as if my Harvard Law degree wasn't enough to be taken seriously. The first year was good, I'll give him that. We traveled, we laughed, we built what I thought was a partnership. But somewhere in year 2, I became less of a wife and more of an accessory. He stopped asking about my work, started making decisions without consulting me. When I made partner at my firm, he took me to dinner and spent the entire night on his phone closing a deal. By year 3, I was living in a gorgeous cage. And that text message? That was the sound of the lock clicking shut. I chose the champagne gown. If I was going to be on display, I might as well shine. I did my makeup flawlessly, put on the diamond earrings he'd given me for our anniversary, the one he'd forgotten until his assistant reminded him, and I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked expensive. I looked elegant. I looked exactly like what Christopher wanted me to be. But inside I was screaming. The charity gala was being held at the Grandview Hotel, one of those places where the chandeliers cost more than people's houses. I arrived separately because Christopher said he had to be there early for photos with the event organizers. That should have been my first clue, but I was still making excuses for him in my head. I walked into that ballroom, and honey, it was stunning. Ice sculptures, champagne towers, women in gowns that cost more than cars, men in tuxedos discussing deals worth millions. I knew most of these people. I'd closed deals with half of them back when I was still practicing law, before Christopher suggested I take a step back to focus on our life together. I spotted him across the room and my breath caught in my throat. Not because he looked handsome, though he did in that custom Tom Ford tux, but because of the woman standing next to him. Amanda. I knew her name because I'd seen her on the company website. Vice President of Strategic Development, 28 years old, white, blonde, everything I wasn't. But it wasn't just that she was there. It was how they were standing, how his hand rested on the small of her back, how she laughed at something he said, touching his arm in a way that was far too familiar. I made my way through the crowd, smiling and greeting people, but my eyes never left them. And then it happened. Christopher saw me coming, and I swear I saw something flash across his face. Not guilt, not embarrassment. It was calculation. He walked toward me with Amanda at his side, and my heart was pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. When he reached me, he smiled, that same smile that used to make me feel special, and said words I'll never forget. "Nicole, I'd like you to meet my partner, Amanda." Partner, not Amanda from work, or Amanda, one of our executives, just partner. The word hung in the air like poison. Amanda extended her hand, and I shook it because what else could I do? Her grip was firm, confident, and when she smiled at me, I saw the truth in her eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "Christopher has told me so much about you." I wanted to ask what he'd told her. Did he mention how I'd given up my career for him? How I'd stood by his side through every business setback? How I'd used my legal expertise to help him navigate deals that made him millions? But instead, I smiled and said, "How lovely." For the next hour, I watched them. I watched how she laughed at his jokes, how she whispered in his ear during the silent auction, how he looked at her the way he used to look at me. Other people noticed, too. I could feel their eyes on me, hear the whispers starting. Women I'd known for years couldn't meet my gaze. Men who'd always respected me suddenly looked uncomfortable in my presence. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. That's where I heard them, 3 women touching up their makeup, not realizing I was in the stall. "Did you see Christopher with that Amanda girl? I thought Nicole was his wife?" "She is. Can you imagine? Standing there watching your husband parade his mistress around? I'd cause a scene. I'd throw my drink in his face. Nicole looks so calm, though. Maybe they have an arrangement." I stayed in that stall until they left, staring at the text message still on my phone. "Don't embarrass me tonight." He knew. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he'd warned me to stay quiet about it. But here's what Christopher didn't know. 2 weeks before that gala, I'd found suspicious charges on our credit card, jewelry from Tiffany's that I'd never received, hotel rooms in cities where he said he was attending conferences alone, romantic dinners for 2 at restaurants we'd never been to together. I'd hired a private investigator. His name was Frank, a retired cop who specialized in infidelity cases. What Frank found broke my heart but saved my life. Photos of Christopher and Amanda together. Timestamps showing their affair had been going on for over a year. Text messages where he called her baby and my future. And the kicker? Email exchanges with his lawyer about quietly divorcing me and offering a settlement that was insulting compared to what I was actually entitled to. See, Christopher thought I was just a pretty face he'd married. He'd forgotten that I was a lawyer who understood marital assets. He'd forgotten that his company had grown from a $50 million valuation to over $2 billion during our marriage. He'd forgotten that I'd been there for every major deal, every strategic decision, every contact that mattered. My name might not have been on the paperwork, but my fingerprints were all over his success. So while he thought he was humiliating me at that gala, I'd already met with my attorney 3 times. Beverly, my old mentor from law school who'd become a shark in divorce litigation, she'd reviewed everything, the prenup, the company valuations, the evidence of infidelity, and the proof that Christopher had tried to hide assets before filing for divorce. "Nicole," Beverly had told me, "you're going to walk away from this with at least $300 million. Maybe more if we can prove what I think we can prove." I'd also discovered something else, something Christopher definitely didn't want public. His company had some financial irregularities that bordered on fraud. Nothing I was involved in. I'd made sure of that years ago, but enough to cause serious problems if the right people started asking questions. Standing in that bathroom, looking at my reflection, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to walk back out there, and I was going to wait for the perfect moment. That moment came during Christopher's keynote speech. He stood at the podium, talking about innovation and partnership and the importance of having the right people by your side, and then he said it. I want to thank my partner Amanda, who's been instrumental in our company's recent success. Her dedication and support have been invaluable to me, both professionally and personally. The room went silent. People glanced at me. Some looked away quickly. Others stared, waiting to see what I'd do. My phone buzzed. A text from Beverly. Everything's filed. You're good to go. I stood up. The movement drew every eye in that ballroom. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and I climbed those steps with my head held high. Christopher's face went from confusion to panic in seconds. I took the microphone from his hand. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Nicole, Christopher's wife. I let that word hang in the air. Wife. I think there's been some confusion tonight, and I'd like to clear it up. Christopher tried to take the microphone back, but I stepped away from him. Security started moving toward the stage, but the event coordinator, a woman I'd helped pro bono years ago, held up her hand to stop them. You see, I continued, my voice steady and clear, my husband has been having an affair with Amanda for over a year. Tonight he brought her here and introduced her as his partner, deliberately humiliating me in front of our friends and colleagues. He sent me a text earlier warning me not to embarrass him tonight. I held up my phone, showing the message on the large screens behind me. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Amanda's face drained of color. Christopher's went bright red. But that's not even the interesting part, I said, warming up now. What's really fascinating is that Christopher planned to quietly divorce me, offering me a settlement of $20 million, while hiding the true value of marital assets, worth over $300 million. He also tried to conceal certain financial irregularities in his company that the SEC might find very interesting. The crowd erupted in whispers. I saw several major investors pull out their phones. So here's what's going to happen, I said, looking directly at Christopher. I've filed for divorce. I've filed for my rightful share of marital assets, and I've provided evidence of attempted fraud to my attorneys, who are prepared to go public if necessary. Christopher, you wanted me not to embarrass you tonight? I smiled. Consider this your lesson in what real embarrassment looks like. I handed the microphone back to a stunned event coordinator and walked off that stage with every ounce of dignity I possessed. Behind me, chaos erupted. Investors surrounded Christopher. Amanda tried to slip away but found herself cornered by curious reporters. Security didn't know who to escort out. I walked straight out of that ballroom, got into my car, and drove to my sister Denise's house, where I'd been secretly staying for the past week. When I walked in, she and my best friend Rachel were waiting with wine and tissues. But I didn't need tissues. I needed to celebrate. That night, the story went viral. By morning, every major news outlet was covering it. Christopher's company stock dropped 15%. 3 board members called for his resignation. Amanda was fired for violating company policy. The divorce took 3 months. Beverly was ruthless. We had evidence, we had witnesses, and we had the law on our side. Christopher tried to fight it, but every move he made just made things worse for him. His lawyers eventually advised him to settle. I walked away with $340 million, the penthouse, which I immediately sold, and something more valuable than money: my self-respect. Today, I run my own law firm specializing in divorce cases for women leaving toxic marriages. I help them understand their worth, their rights, and their power. I've helped 43 women in the past year alone get the settlements they deserved. Christopher? His company barely survived the scandal. Amanda left him once the money troubles started. Turns out she was exactly the gold digger everyone suspected. He tried to text me last week. "Can we talk?" it said. I replied through my lawyers. See, here's what I learned that night in the ballroom. Humiliation is only powerful if you let it define you. Christopher thought he could make me small, quiet, and compliant. He thought that text message would keep me in line, but all it did was remind me of who I was before I met him. I was Nicole, the girl who put herself through law school, the woman who made partner before 30, the lawyer who never lost when she knew she was right. And I was still that woman. I'd just forgotten for a little while. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone's trying to dim your light, take notes, document everything, know your worth, build your exit strategy. And when the moment comes, don't just walk away. Walk away with everything you deserve. And that's how you turn humiliation into victory. If this story resonated with you, show some love by hitting that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Nicole's shoes. I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got more stories that'll remind you of your worth. Remember, never let anyone dim your light. You're the queen of your own story. Now go reclaim your crown.